it takes a lot of vulnerability to be courageous, and it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. That's what skillful courage is all about. This is the Mindfulness and Grief podcast, and I'm Heather Stang, author, yoga therapist, and thanatologist. You didn't choose grief, but here you're choosing how to show up for yourself, and I'll guide you along the way. In each episode, you'll experience practical tools and sound advice to help you tend to your loss, honor your love, and rebuild a life where grief, hope, and meaning can coexist. Great. So first, I want to welcome back my co-host, Amanda Palermo.
Hi there.
Hi. And for those of you who are joining us again, welcome back. For those of you who are new, I just want to recap. Right now, we are talking about the mindfulness and grief system, which is a process that I put together that's grounded in Buddhism, Hinduism, and principles of thanatology, which is a study of death, dying, and bereavement. And we have made it through 3 of the steps. And the first step was conscious relaxation, which helps us settle our nervous system. The second step is mindful awareness, which helps us expand our view beyond just our suffering, but it also helps us find some stability in the present moment. And then the third step is compassion for all, but we really focus on self-compassion. And I really think of those first 3 steps as our foundations for mindfulness. These are the 3 things that are classically taught when you go to, say, a community mindfulness class, and they work really well for grief. And here we are in step 4, which I call skillful courage, which is really about learning how to be with those difficult emotions that can feel really scary.
Yes. And I think this is where the real work begins.
I agree. It takes some work to be present to your grieving body and to be in the present moment and to treat yourself with kindness, especially if that's not something you're used to. But this is where we really start to dive deep.
Yes. And I think can be a little scary. And I think the work, I guess, for me, when I say work, it's the feeling of knowing when to go towards what's feeling uncomfortable, when to move away from what's not, maybe it's not the right time to move towards uncomfortable feelings or vulnerability, but sometimes you may want to test the waters and see how it feels to lean in towards those feelings. And that oscillation just requires a lot of investigation and like self-inquiry.
And listening to yourself when you have that inquiry, because there isn't a right or wrong. I have one story that I often share about a member of my online grief support group, Awaken. This is from many years ago. And he came to the group, and he was in a widow and widowers group in his community, like outside of our community. And he said, the grief counselor running this group told me that I'm not spending enough time with my grief and that I need to spend a half an hour in my bedroom every day crying. And I asked him, how do you feel about that? And that sounds horrifying. And I was like, it does. Number one, that's not coming from him. That's not coming from his inquiry. That was someone else's agenda. And if we look at grief as a natural reaction to loss, It means that you are the authority of your experience. And as professionals, we're here to guide you, to give you some tools, to help you figure out what questions to ask and what to do. But it's so important to learn how to trust yourself.
I'm so glad you said that because I think sometimes people may think that we're there as the grief professional to tell you what to do or to give you the answers on how you're feeling. But really, I think like our job is more to guide someone to ask the questions for themselves so that they can turn inward and say, how am I feeling? What do I need right now? And that's skillful courage, knowing what it is that, that person needs. But that's up for the person to decide. That's not up to us as the grief professionals to just decide how someone's feeling. That's
Right.
the griever's doing that.
Now, that being said, there is a technique that I believe comes from hospice care called dosing yourself with grief that can be helpful. And that is, for instance, if you need to go to work because you need money, because things cost things, maybe you've realized that you're trying to stuff down emotions before you go to work. It can be helpful if it's right for you to maybe let yourself cry, let the tears come before you go to work, right? To give yourself that space. So I'm not saying that's never a great idea, but skillful courage is about that oscillation. And it is where we really start to listen to ourselves. And part of why we have step one, conscious relaxation, which really is more about, it's more about grounding and safety than anything, because you can't relax, you can't regulate your nervous system if you don't feel safe. That's first because here in skillful courage, that oscillation might be back to those grounding and safety oriented practices that give you a skillful distraction from the intensity of the pain. But this is the place where we also want to start empowering you to hold and nurture the grief that's showing up.
I think that there are times when going into your room and crying for however long, like that can really be beneficial for somebody or for even for me at some point. Sometimes if I have a grief wave that comes up, I might just say, what, I think what might be good for me right now is to go in my room and just have a good cry, like a good, ugly cry. That's what I feel like I want to do right now. But then other times I might say, I don't want to do that today. That doesn't feel right for me today. I have to make another choice, or I just can't tend to this right now. And I think that's what the skillful courage is teaching us is when to make those decisions for ourselves.
And there's a nuance too about being with the emotion. And by the way, I am a go in the room crier. That is totally my grieving style. I go through so many puffs plus with lotion. Like that is the only tissue I have in my house. I will not deviate because allergies and grief. Like that, I cry so hard when I'm grieving. It's very embodied. And I think it's important to say that for some of us at times too, there can be a fear of letting go into those emotions because I often say it feels like you're going to spontaneously combust or you won't come back from it.
Yes, I agree.
If I let this out, it will consume me and I won't make it back. And the reality is you do. People don't combust from it. You go through the pain, and tears are the body's way of releasing. And there can be something really cathartic in letting those tears flow through. And then there's another piece to that vulnerability as well. So we've got like crying on one end, and we've got taking a break from crying on the other. And then there's that place of being with the actual emotion that's showing up? Because grief is an umbrella term for a whole bunch of emotions. So, what are some of the emotions like you've experienced as part of grief?
I'm so glad that you said that because it can look like so many things. Grief, not just crying. Crying is one of the ways. It could also mean, I don't know, silence, not talking, withdrawal. It could also mean feeling empty, numb, feeling no emotion at all, not crying, just saying, God, I don't feel anything right now. I feel empty. Anger, brain fog, confusion, frozen. You can feel frozen. It just can look like you could feel scattered.
Fear.
Can fear. Yes. Yeah. I think there can be tremendous highs and then tremendous lows. Yeah. Hostility can also be another part of it. Yeah. I think sometimes feeling like you don't want to engage socially, feeling antisocial. Yeah. There's so many things. It can look like so many things. Overeating, undereating, right?
Yeah, it's all the things. There can be that. There can also be guilt. There can be self criticism. There can be doubt. So I guess we're just listing off like so many words, which if you didn't hear yourself in there, it doesn't mean you're doing it wrong. It just means the list is huge. And so there can be wisdom in discerning what you're feeling and spending some time with that feeling, knowing that the feeling is a messenger rather than an enemy. I think that's a big lesson from Buddhism that we can take is that these feelings that we are scared of are really a guidance system and information and data that something is wrong and something needs tended to. And we lean back into step 3, self compassion, and let the part of us that is hurting be cared for by the part of us that cares about our suffering. And this step has some techniques to help you do that. Now, before we go into this, I do want to drop in a little conversation about grieving styles, as my advisor and professor, Dr. Terry Martin, and his colleague and a great thanatologist, Ken Doka, wrote about in their book, Grieving Beyond Gender. You and I talked a lot about crying. And so that is a hallmark of the intuitive griever. And there's a continuum here. We're not 100% intuitive. We're on a scale. And on the other end of the scale is an instrumental griever. So if you're listening and you're someone who's, I don't cry, I care, I'm grieving, but your grief is expressed through maybe action, like running or building something or going and buying books on grief, not to express emotions, but to learn about maybe the science behind it. You're more cognitive than emotional. That's on the other side of the spectrum. And neither's right or wrong, and neither's good or bad. We're just different. And the reason why their book is Grieving Beyond Gender, and by the way, back in the day, the book was called tongue in cheek. It was called Men Don't Cry, Women Do. And that was the stereotype. But their research showed it's not a man or woman thing. It's just we associate culturally masculine and feminine styles, but I like that they gave it a different name so that we can just be gender neutral. So again, it's intuitive, is very emotional, instrumental is very active and cognitive, and we're all somewhere in that spectrum. In fact, like Amanda, you and I, here we are studying grief. That's our instrumental side coming out.
Yeah, I definitely think I'm both. I
Yeah.
feel like I connect to both because I'm like you, I'm a crier. Like I'll just and I'm not like I don't feel shame around it or embarrassed. Like I just let it out. I'm like, this is happening. everyone.
Go with
But
it.
yeah, just go with it. And it feels good for me sometimes to just let it out. But then other times I really like to study this part, the grieving mind and the brain and the cognitive side and all that stuff. So yeah, it's definitely like a spectrum.
Yeah. Yeah. So they would say you have a primary and a secondary style. So for you
Mm-hmm.
and I would say our primary is instrumental and our secondary is intuitive.
Do you think that I wanted to ask you, do you think stoicism falls under that umbrella, maybe a little bit of an instrumental griever?
Maybe that's a really great question. And I'm
I
really
ask that
sad.
because I feel that's something I see quite a bit of. It could just be me, but I feel that a response sometimes to grief can be this idea of stoicism, of just keep a stiff upper lip and just tough, you'll get through it.
Hmm.
And I
You're
don't know.
defining, if you're defining stoicism as stiff upper lip, I would say no, because, and again, now unfortunately, Dr. Martin died many years ago. Certainly asked Dr. Doka, but here's what I'm thinking. An instrumental griever isn't necessarily a stiff upper lip person. They're still feeling, they're still grieving. They're just showing it in a different way. So I guess maybe there's more instrumental grievers who tend to be stoic, but I don't know that I would put the two together all the time because it doesn't mean that they're intentionally adopting that attitude. It's more embodied, it just shows up differently. And I don't know enough about stoicism. If you're a stoicism expert, you can reach out to us and let us know because that's very interesting.
It makes me think of how just sometimes our society can be a little death phobic.
The instrumental griever isn't necessarily death phobic.
Hmm,
They're just processing it differently.
differently. Yeah. That makes sense. That
Yeah.
makes sense.
Yeah. I could see either side of the spectrum
Hmm.
suppressing feelings, showing up where they're stuffing it down to appear a certain way. However, internally they feel emotional or they feel instrumental. So now that we've talked about that, because I think it is really important, I don't want to make anyone who isn't a crier feel like they're grieving wrong because you're not. I'll give a quick example. I was giving a talk where I explained instrumental and intuitive, and a woman said, "Oh, this explains my son. I didn't think he cared about the fact that his dad was dead, but as soon as his dad died, he started jogging 5 miles every day, and he never jogged before. So he's moving his energy of grief. That's how I see it. Like crying is moving the energy of grief. For him, running was moving the energy of grief, just in a different way."
That's a beautiful way to explain it. Moving the grief through the body in different ways.
Yeah, grief is an energy that needs to be moved, basically,
Mm.
which is, I remember writing in that book when I was reading it, yoga. So I was like, yoga is a great way, whether you're instrumental or intuitive, to move the energy through.
Oh boy, is it ever. It's a great, yes.
Yeah.
Because I think that I can't tell you how many times I've gotten on my mat just feeling like I'm not in a good place mentally. And then after my practice, I will think, God, I feel so much better. What was I like so upset about before? Like, why was that such an issue? I just feel great now. And I think it's something about moving whatever is there, it just moves all that out, through and out.
And all the things that yoga and other types of movement do for your nervous system, for your hormones, they help you regulate. And
Yes.
that is something the grieving body needs. So let's also address, since skillful courage has that word courage in the title, let's talk about the expression, "Oh, you're so strong." I really admire how strong he is through this. He's been through so much. He's so strong.
Yeah. I remember hearing a story this was a long time ago. Someone was telling me about a woman whose husband had passed and they had a lot of children. And they were saying, now she's a single mom and she's raising these kids all by herself. She didn't fall apart. She kept on going. And they kept saying that she didn't fall apart. She didn't fall apart. And I thought to myself, but would it be so bad if she fell apart? What's wrong with falling apart? It was an opposite way of saying, she's so strong. She's just so strong. And I remember it just sitting, it didn't sit with me very well because I think the strength is in the vulnerability. And if somebody does fall apart and has the courage to allow themselves to be vulnerable and to fall apart, that's okay. That takes courage. That takes strength. That is strong.
And she may have fallen apart. And guess what? You can fall apart and still raise kids while you're grieving. People do it all the time. Now, there are balls you have to keep in the air, right? You have to keep them fed. You have to keep yourself alive. There's some very hard things. And so while there is the fact that people do have to summon up courage, a lot of people who are grieving are like, I'm not strong. I just have to do this. And I think it's the way that it's said, where it makes some distance. And it's, if you show any vulnerability, you're going to be judged. If you call me up, if I'm like, oh, Amanda, you're so strong. And then you call me up and you're like, I can't do it today. Can you just come over and make me a sandwich and let me cry? It's going to seem like I'm not a safe person to do that, because then I'll be like, oh, she's falling apart. And so if you are someone who has heard that, oh, you're so strong, and you cringe at it, you're not alone. But what you just said, that piece about it takes a lot of vulnerability to be courageous, and it takes a lot of courage to be vulnerable. That's what skillful courage is all about, is understanding you can't really separate the two.
Yes. And there's no choice. You don't have a choice when you've lost your person and whatever situation you're in. You are trying to go on with your life and just do daily activities. And so then people say, oh, well, gosh, you're so strong. You're getting through this. You just don't have a choice, really. What else are you going to do? And I also think it puts like unnecessary pressure on someone. Like I know for myself, like I didn't want to feel like I had to be strong. It felt like, to me, sometimes it felt like pressure. But that was just my experience.
That being said, if you're someone who feels strong, go with that. We're not saying you shouldn't feel strong, but it has to come from you. Kind of like the guy crying in the room. That needed to come from him. If you're someone who's, wow, I am doing it. Actually, you and I had that conversation before we started recording, because I've had some losses in my life the past few weeks. There have been several. And you asked me how I was, and I was like, you know what? I'm taking care of myself. I'm doing it. And that actually did feel like a strength to me, even though things are sad and hard. But that came from me.
And also the discernment.
Yes.
To
Say
know
more.
the difference. There's in Sanskrit, discernment, there's a word for it's in Sanskrit, it's viveka. And I wanted to actually talk about this because this is like a requirement actually for in yoga, in yogic terms, for like spiritual liberation, spiritual freedom. And it basically means discernment, it means wisdom, right judgment. But it really, when you put it into practice, it's a way to see things as they truly are. So with clarity. And so when you can see things as they truly are, you're able to make a clear decision and really discern and decide what it is that you need to do for yourself. So that inner wisdom is like deep, it's within you. But it's something that I remember taking like a philosophy class, and the teacher was talking about this idea of viveka and just how it was just like an Indian philosophical idea. And I think that when we're practicing yoga on the mat and we're doing poses, that's how we're learning about discernment. We're learning about viveka. When we're on our mat, we learn about, how does this feel in my body? How is my breath? Do I need to do more in this pose? Do I need to do less? You slowly start learning that through the postures. And then hopefully what ends up happening is then in your life, you start doing that off the mat in your life. And so this is like, for me, like a big component to skillful courage.
One of the points, if you will, in skillful courage is to learn to discern when to approach and when to step back from painful emotions. So you nailed it. And what I love about what you said and the yoga philosophy is you're doing that so then you can make wise and skillful choices about what to do with it.
Yes. Yes. That hopefully, it's such a deep thing, but this is to me like one of the reasons why someone would start practicing yoga. There's many reasons why somebody would want to practice yoga, but this is something that we're trying to cultivate on our mat. Because when you can really learn to have discernment and see things as they truly are, that's where there's like a sense of freedom in that.
And in the mindfulness world, that's really why we are being mindful, is so we can have clarity of mind. What is true? What is untrue? What's a construct of mind? And there's a myth in mindfulness that when a difficult emotion arises, you should push it away because it's not this peaceful, pristine experience. But the reality is that the practice of being mindful with a difficult emotion is very important to liberate ourselves from suffering. And this probably leads us into maybe a good time to talk about practices for getting there. And you talked about how to use yoga postures as a way to get clarity. And do I move closer to the stretch? Do I move further away? And how that can be a metaphor for life. What's your favorite practice from Skillful Courage?
Rain.
That was the answer we were looking
Yeah.
for.
Yeah. And what's great about rain is that the discernment, the viveka, is like you start learning how to practice that in rain, in the
So
allow and investigate.
let's talk about what rain is. And I'll start by saying what it stands for, and I'll let you take it away with what it is. So, RAIN is an acronym, RAIN, originally created by Megan McDonough and really refined and probably made popular by Tara Brach. And it stands for recognize, allow, investigate, and nurture.
So the way it manifests for me personally is when you are having something that's a difficult emotion. The idea is to, okay, recognize I'm having a difficult emotion and to name what it is that you're feeling. And then once you've named what it is that you're feeling, then you can, then the allow to me is where you practice that discernment. So you can say, I feel safe enough that I can stay with this emotion. Or you might decide, I don't want to lean into this right now. This doesn't feel comfortable. I'm ending it here. But if you decide that you feel safe enough and it's a good time and you want to just lean into that difficult emotion, then you can start investigating Where does this emotion live in my body? How does it feel? And then you tend to it, which is the end for nurture, tending to it a little bit. What do I do with this feeling? What do I do now? Do I need to lie down? Do I need to take a walk? Do I need to do a practice? And you nurture and tend to that emotion.
That investigate piece is where the real work is done. And the way I like to see it is you visually see myself stepping out of my mind and turning into my body. So usually for me, it's below my neck. I've had people say that the sensation's in their head. So you might still be up in that space. But the idea is to not go into the story of what's happening, but into the felt sense of the emotion. So, how big is it in my body? If it were made of a substance, what would it be made of? Like metal, fabric, leaves, cloud, gas? Does it have a color? Does it have a temperature? Could it move? There's just, you're really thinking of it as the physical aspects of the emotion. And in that, it makes it feel more manageable and less overwhelming because you aren't in that rumination. It's a different way of approaching it. And that nurture piece is huge because you're not just experiencing it, but you're taking action, which is compassion. We talked last time about how compassion always has an action to it. It's not just empathy. I often say phoning a friend sometimes is the thing afterwards. It can be anything. You just listen. And a lot of times your inner wisdom's going to tell you. And on average, rain is such an interesting practice because it is so powerful, but it doesn't take a lot of time, does it?
No, I was going to mention that you can do this in a minute or two. I think when I was first practicing it, I felt that I needed a little more time. But then after a while, I just knew that I could use it at any moment, particularly if a grief wave was coming on at an inconvenient time, maybe, then I could do rain to myself, even if there were a bunch of people around. They didn't know I was doing rain, but I was just doing rain to myself in that moment.
It, it's different than other meditative practices. You're not necessarily sitting on the cushion planning to practice rain. It's an on the spot emergency response to a big emotion. I've done it in the grocery store while pushing a cart, my eyes open, or pulled over on the side of the road. I had it happen at a funeral where I thought I was going to start either wailing or having a panic attack, neither of which were okay with me. And I did rain, and it probably took me about 10 seconds to realize in that investigation piece that I was holding my breath, which was part of the distress. And then probably another 60 seconds for me to come to the understanding that I was feeling a sense of overwhelming sadness that I was resisting, but that if I let go of the resistance to the sadness and just let myself breathe and feel, that I could stay in the pew and not run out, which was the next thing I was going to do. I was either going to wail, pass out, or run out of the church. And then I remembered I had rain. So the hardest part of rain, we always joke about this, is to remember that you have rain.
That's so funny. I'm laughing because it's so true, because you can in the moment forget that, because when it happens, if a grief wave happens or something distressful is going on, like something distressing is going on, you can forget that you have it and going, oh my God, what do I do now? Like I'm having this. And then you have to remember that you have it, that you can use it.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
And I
funny.
want to quickly say, because I always feel like when I tell this story, I'm not saying wailing in a church is bad, but I was a close circle member of this person. It was someone from a friend group from a long time ago, and I was a bystander. And this person was just so great that it brought up this existential grief. And for me in that moment, had I wailed, it would have been really strange to me. So just putting that out there, that there are times when wailing would be perfectly fine. That just is a choice I made. And I really think I would have more than likely out, which wouldn't have been good either. Let's talk about a couple more practices. I wanted to bring up one of my favorites for this one, for skillful courage, which is dancing with strength and vulnerability. And
Mm,
this is a mindful movement practice. So, this one, you can begin with either strength or vulnerability. If you're doing it on your own, I would say go to the one that feels most accessible first. So, if you're feeling like, I feel really vulnerable right now and I just want to feel safe, then you would start with vulnerability and you move your body into a position that feels safe enough to be vulnerable. And now, if you aren't in a place where you can move, actually, I led a workshop yesterday where there was someone in a car on Zoom. I was like, just imagine. And I've had this happen too with people who didn't feel their bodies were injured or they had mobility issues. You don't have to actually move. You could visualize this as well or do small movements. But the idea is to just feel in your body what it's like to feel safe enough to be vulnerable. So moving into a position of safety, which might be like child's pose if you do yoga, or it could be covering yourself up with a blanket or curling up in a ball, whatever it is for you, savoring the sensation and then making it even more so you could turn up the volume on it. So if I were in a little ball and someone's like, how could you make this more so? I might ball up even more, crunch and hug myself even tighter. If you could see me, I'm making a little ball. And then you move into the next posture, which is what would it feel like to be strong and courageous? So maybe this is like standing up with your arms outstretched or overhead. I see a lot of people when I lead this in retreats and things, they go into like this super person pose. Sometimes there's just all sorts of poses people do. It's really neat. It's so neat to watch. And then you savor that and you make that even bigger, even more so, exaggerate it. And then we just spend some time moving back and forth between the two for a little bit, experiencing the transition. What's it like in the middle, like between these two? And just go back and forth. And then at the end, move into the one that feels most right in this moment for you, whatever that is. And then we usually have a period of journaling, which a lot of magic comes out there. You
that's
could also
great.
do this as an
Great.
art. I love this practice.
I think
You could
that's
also
really
do it
great.
as an art practice where you draw. If expressive arts are your thing, you could draw yourself in the position of vulnerability or draw yourself in the position of strength, like you're doing, like you're sketching out a statue.
Hmm.
It's a very embodied way to feel this and to move. Again, moving that energy and practice discernment.
I think too it's good if somebody isn't necessarily natural kinesthetic a kinesthetic person so that they can actually feel embodied or learn how to feel embodied if it doesn't
Absolutely.
come naturally to them.
I've done this with all types of groups, and it's always really moving to me what comes out of it in the journaling afterwards, how people felt. A lot of times when I've done this or when other clients have done this, there's a comfort with the two that arises, that emerges, an understanding of these two sides. And then I want to follow it up with a really neat journaling prompt.
Oh, tell us. Tell us.
Okay, this is one of my favorite journaling prompts ever. I believe it's in my guided journal from grief to peace. If it isn't, I'm going to go write it in there. I'm pretty sure it's from there. Reflect on a time when you did something that frightened you, something you weren't sure you could do, but you did it anyway.
I've done that journal prompt several times, and it's one of my favorite journal prompts to do, because it's, yeah, so many things come out of it. It's great.
And if you are in that place where everybody's telling you how strong you are and you're not believing it, it gives you a way to explore it without buying into the narrative that you should be strong. Because I will tell you this, anyone who goes through grief is strong, even if you don't feel it. Because some days just waking up is an effort.
Yes. I love that you said that, Heather. The simple task of just waking up and getting out of bed can be a big accomplishment for somebody.
It can be a big accomplishment for me some days. Same with depression. There are times when I've had a depressive period of time and also grief periods of time, sometimes separate, sometimes together, where just getting up and putting on the socks and brushing the teeth is an insurmountable task, and you surmount it and you're like, dang, did it. Or you don't even say that because you don't have the energy for it. So if you're listening to this podcast, by the way, you're doing something for yourself. You're gaining knowledge, you're taking action. Even if you don't do any of these exercises, but I hope you do, you're dipping your toe in the water of tending to what hurts. And that is skillful courage.
And I also think if you're listening, it might be fun to explore that journal prompt on your own time if you feel up to it, because I think it's really a good one.
Yeah. I want to leave us on this note that skillful courage in grief isn't about force or fearlessness, that it's about balance and knowing when to lean into and knowing when to rest. And that it's that vulnerability and presence that leads us to an authentic type of strength. Not the forced kind, not the faked kind, but the kind that builds resilience.
Yes.
Be the bamboo, right? Bamboo is both very strong to sustain typhoon, hurricane force winds, and it's strong enough because it's flexible.
Mm.
It can bend and then it can pop up again. Maybe that's not what grief looks like. It's not really popping back up. Maybe a slower motion pop up, but still, I really think, and then another wind comes and another wind comes. So I think bamboo is an appropriate plant. That's the plant of grief as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, that's a great way to look at it. I love that. Yeah.
Yeah. Any final thoughts?
No, I think we said it all. This was a good one, and it's very, I don't know, I really like this work that's done in this section, in this skillful courage. It's something that I'm always still in, I feel like, every day.
I think it's a turning point. Each one is a turning point, but this is where we go from tending to our humanness to really starting to talk about and tend to the experience of grief. And we can't leave out the person who died when we talk about the experience of grief. And that's coming up in a few steps from now. So know that their narrative matters. This teaches you how to be with the feelings around that narrative. But before we get to talking about the continuing bond with the person who died in a couple episodes, next podcast, we will be talking about getting unstuck. Not that any of you are probably actually stuck. You might just feel like you're stuck.
Yeah. It's a natural thing that happens.
It does. And so I hope you tune in next time for that. And in the meantime, if you need to find Amanda, you can find her at,
Instagram at Amanda Palermo 108.
and you can find me at heatherstang.com. And until next time, be gentle with yourself.
See you on the next one.
This brings us to the end of today's episode of the Mindfulness and Grief podcast. If you found it helpful, please follow the show and consider leaving a review. It helps others find their way here when they need support the most. Then head on over to heatherstang.com, where you can join my Awaken Grief support community free for 14 days. You'll meet with me and other kind-hearted members several times a week. Get access to the Mindfulness and Grief course, plus guided meditations, journaling prompts, and more to help you navigate grief. If you are a grief professional or volunteer, you can also learn about my Mindfulness and Grief Coach certification. I'll teach you how to share the mindfulness and grief system with others, and just as importantly, how to walk the talk and care for yourself along the way. I'm so glad you chose to show up for yourself today. May these teachings benefit you and those you love. Be gentle with your heart and come back soon.